Welcome again to Rural Daneside TV and to the first of our videos for the season of Holy Week and Easter. I've set these videos in my garden. There are going to be 4 of them on the key holy days of Palm Sunday, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday and Easter Sunday. As I'm coming down the steps into my front garden, I'm sure that you can see a vision of pure neglect. My garden's always at its worst in Holy Week. I'm busy going up to Christmas, and then afterwards there just doesn't seem to be time to spend a moment in it. It's usually after Easter that I begin to do any work. The ground feels inhospitable and stony, dried up, and probably the only thing that would thrive here at the moment is weeds. The Holy Week story is the story of the ground becoming fertile once again. Do you remember the Exodus story, the story of the Israelites being set free from Pharaoh and the Egyptians? In their wanderings in the desert, they came to a time and place where they had no water. There were rocks in front of them, and Moses struck the rocks with his staff to reveal streams of living water, water which gave them refreshment for the journey ahead. Holy Week is the story of how those perpetual streams of living water are released for every time and every place. The release of wells of grace for the renewal and redemption of the whole of creation. It's a story of judgment, but not one of punishment. It's a story of judgment and transformation. And the story begins with confrontation. On Palm Sunday last year, in some of our churches, we had visitors. I don't know if you remember, but we had Max and Scar, the 2 gorgeous donkeys owned by the Kennelys from Plumtree Farm. Max and Scar are funny. They're absolutely gorgeous, but apparently they'll only go everywhere together. So that's why we had 2 donkeys instead of just 1. This year, we would have liked donkeys everywhere because Max and Scar were greeted with really enthusiastic waving of palm crosses and branches. I think everybody wanted to get on them, but we didn't actually ride them. We led them through the churchyard, reenacting the Palm Sunday procession and hearing the Passion narrative of Holy Week. We would have liked to do that again and to do it in more churches. We often think that Christ's arrival on a donkey in Jerusalem is a mark of his humility and the kind of kingship that he has, because a donkey is the most humble of pack animals. We'd think of a king arriving in glory, a triumphal procession on a huge charger covered in the trappings of royalty. Well, that's true, but Palm Sunday also represents something else. It represents a critical turning point in Jesus' ministry. By entering Jerusalem on a colt, Jesus was actually making a political statement, and it was a highly dangerous one. Everyone who was watching would have been familiar with the Old Testament prophecies, and in particular, Zechariah chapter 9. Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter Jerusalem. Lo, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. He will cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem, and the battle bow shall be cut off, and he shall command peace to the nations. His dominion shall be from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. So by riding in on a donkey, Jesus is making a clear statement that he is the Messiah. The crowds of people gather to welcome him. They cheer, they shout, they strew palm branches in his path. After all, they've heard about the raising of Lazarus from the dead. Could this be the king that they've been waiting for? But then Jesus doesn't do what they expect. He doesn't raise an army to get rid of the invading Romans. Gradually the crowds melt away, not understanding. But in fact, the triumphal entry of Jesus sets in motion a chain of events. And from then on, the action of Holy Week moves fast. It's as though Jesus has set himself against the spiritual forces which are keeping Jerusalem, and in particular the temple, from being the beacon of light to the nations, which is its calling. It's a confrontation. The full forces of all earthly powers marshal against Jesus, in particular the religious leaders who want to keep the stability of the uneasy peace with the Roman rulers. And it's a confrontation which can only end one way, with Jesus' execution and death. The Gospels record several confrontations. First, Jesus goes right to the heart of Jerusalem, to the temple in which God's presence dwells within the Holy of Holies. When Jesus overturns the tables of the money changers, he's judging the whole religious system because it keeps people away from God. It makes God the preserve of people who can afford it, if they're even allowed into the temple in the first place. And so Jesus turns upside down the endless round of sacrifice and exchange, the spiritual forces of bargaining and profit. Jesus makes a point then of eating with outcasts and sinners, the sort of people whose table a king would never grace. You'd expect a king to eat with the priests, the scribes, the rulers. And Jesus, in doing this, judges the system of merit and human worth, and he inverts it. He says who is of value. He challenges the spiritual forces of oppression which diminish human dignity. He accepts the ministry of a woman who pours costly perfume on his feet, a woman who wouldn't have been allowed anywhere near the temple. But his actions cause his followers even to question him. And then he seems to shame himself by washing the feet of his disciples and taking the role of a slave. Jerusalem had become a place which was hard-hearted, a place where systems and behaviours stopped people from flourishing, stopped them from accessing the love of God, and stopped them from bringing God's love to the world around them. And I think that can be true in every day and age. It's been absolutely wonderful over the past couple of weeks to see the tremendous upsurge in neighbourliness, in generosity, and in even self-sacrifice for the benefit of others, which has come about through the tough times that we're experiencing at the moment with the coronavirus epidemic. But it also reminds us that there are things in our own society which need to be challenged, things which prevent other people from flourishing, things which prevent them from accessing the love of God and from sharing the love of God with others even. UK food poverty and inequality is just one example. Our lives are really like a microcosm of Holy Week. And at this beginning of the week, let's think about the times when we need to challenge too, just as Jesus did. Amen.